We have Linda Blackelk. She's a professor at United Tribes, and she's going to talk to us about edible weeds.
Yep. So I collected these from my walk from my minivan into the door of this building. And all of these have an economic value. They're all medicinal and edible, which is crazy because I literally walked over them in the parking lot, and I think most of us walk over them every day and think of them as weeds and annoyances and things like that. And so I'll be talking about some others, but I just wanted to point out probably one of the bane of your existence, right? Wormwood in English, Artemisia absinthium. I'll talk about that one a little bit. This is one that I actually don't have in my talk. Does anyone know what this one is? Pretty common. You've probably seen it before. It's a member of the mustard family, so like where we get mustard seeds and things like that. Some people call it peppergrass or pepperweed, or even poor man's pepper. Like a lot of people call it that. When you eat the seeds, it does have a really sort of spicy, horseradishy bite to it, and it's used as a seasoning. It's used historically as a seasoning as well. Lepidium densiflorum is the scientific name of that one. Woo! Oh my God! It's potent, but we've even used it as a horseradish substitute in my family. We'll take the seeds, we'll mix them in with a little bit of mayo or something like that, and kind of make the horseradish sauce that they serve with prime rib. We'll use these instead, and it's really good. And that was growing in the parking lot. I don't tend to eat weeds that grow in parking lots, but I'll try a little bit of them. And of course, the ever-present dandelion, our best friend, but that annoying best friend, like kind of like, that relative who's always there for you, but sometimes you get really annoyed with it. That's the dandelion, of course, totally edible leaves. The entire dandelion is edible and medicinal. And I'll show you some photos because people spend money on buying dandelions these days. And if you go over to Walmart in Bismarck, you can actually buy a small box of dandelion root tea for about $15. It's a small box, So dandelions, of course, are medicine and food. We'll talk about that a little bit. Does anyone know the English name of this one? Plantain. Yep, Plantago major. If it had purple at the base, I would call it Plantago regalii. Some people call this, plantain in English. I've heard it called white man's footprint. I don't know if you've ever heard it called that before, because they say that it sort of followed people, pioneers who were coming out west. But there's actually a totally native plantain that looks almost exactly like this, but it has purple at the base of the leaves. So this is the non-native Plantago major, which is totally fine. It's still an amazing food and an amazing medicine. How many of you guys, you don't have to tell me if you take it, but how many of you have heard of Metamucil before? Metamucil, right? Yeah, you see the commercials, they flavor it with orange or whatever. Does anyone know what it's made out of? Psyllium fiber. What is psyllium fiber? It's plantain seeds. That's all that Metamucil is. That's all psyllium fiber is. It's the seeds of plantain. And so if you even look at, sometimes they redesigned it, I think, recently, but if you look at the container of Metamucil, it'll actually have a picture of plantain on the front of it. And so they just take the seeds, they dry them, grind them up, and they'll kind of winnow the husks off a little bit and just add orange flavoring to it. You can really just use plain plantain seeds as a fiber beverage. Sometimes I'll toast up the seeds in a cast iron pan and I'll sprinkle them on bowls of soup. I'll put them in salad, things like that. It's just a really simple way to get extra fiber, and they actually taste really good. They kind of have a nutty, almost like a pecan-like flavor when they're toasted up. So you can even put them on ice cream and things like that. My kids just, sprinkles. So those are really simple and just growing right out here in the parking lot. There was a lot of milkweed that was growing out here today, and I actually don't have that in my presentation, but milkweed, of course, is pretty common. And, we all know that it's important butterfly food, but actually milkweed is becoming more and more of a people food too. In our family, we harvest the young parts of the milkweed. So we'll just basically pinch off the top like this, and we put this in soups and stews. It's a really important indigenous food. People have been using it for thousands of years, but probably my favorite way to use milkweed is something that you can all do right now because it's ready. You know those weird looking pods, milkweed pods that kind of look like a claw, right? So those look funny, but I will tell you my secret recipe. It's so good. You take those, you open them up, and you take the like white fluffy seeds out, and you got to get them before they're too tough and old. So right now is the perfect time. Take the fluffy seeds out of the center. I stuff them with cheese and jalapeno, and then I wrap them in bacon and grill them. And we call them milkweed poppers in my family. Freaking delicious. They're so good. And they're fun too because everyone looks at them and they're like, what the heck is that? Like, you want me to eat that? And they taste them and they're like, oh my gosh, that's the best thing ever. Milkweed almost has a cheese-like flavor by itself. We eat the milkweed buds in the early summer, early to midsummer, and those almost taste like a green bean. But the milkweed pods, especially when they're stuffed, they taste like cheese. So really, really good. Oh, I don't even have one here, but you know the daylilies, like all the daylilies that all of us plant in our yards, they just come back every year and they spread. If you have not tried breaded and fried daylily buds, you're totally missing out. That's something you have to do next year when your daylilies, I mean, they might still be blooming right now. I'm not sure. Mine aren't, but a lot of people can still get the flower buds of the daylily. Talk about I've actually fooled people before. We take the daylily buds, we roll them, put them in egg, flour, back in the egg, and then I do panko breadcrumbs to make them extra crispy, and then I fry them, and people think that they're mozzarella sticks. I'm not even kidding. They're like, how did you get these mozzarella sticks that aren't gooey? Those taste a lot like cheese as well. So delicious. I also found some mallow. You guys, I'm sorry, these were small because they were growing in the parking lot, but you've probably seen them really large before. It's the one that has like the fan-shaped leaves. And it's kind of a pest in people's lawns, the cracks of their driveway. Trying to find, there's one of the leaves it's kind of really what the leaf shape is like, kind of fan-shaped. So this is actually a mallow. Literally, how many of you guys knew that marshmallows were made from plants? I have a lot of students who have never knew that marshmallows are actually made by boiling the mallow plant down. Those tall plants in your flower bed, hollyhocks, are a mallow as well, and you can even that's why the leaf kind of looks like this wild mallow. So you can actually take the leaves of hollyhocks and cook them down into a gel-like substance. Then you add a bunch of sugar and whip them, and you can make marshmallows out of those as well. And you can do the same thing with this wild mallow as well. Marshmallows are just made from the first cousin of this plant. So Malva neglecta. Sorry, I don't know how many of you guys like to use the botanical names, but they can be fun. So, these are just things, like I said, that are just growing everywhere. This one is another small version of a plant that can get fairly large and bushy, probably along the side of your gravel road, along the side of your driveway. This is curly cup gumweed, Grindelia squarosa. I'm going to pass it around just so you guys can see it. If you've never taken a close-up look at it, the reason it's called gumweed is because the flowers here, first of all, you can see the curly little cup has like these curly tendrils on the flower. If you touch it, it's very sticky, right? So it has a resin, and I've heard some older folks call it resin weed, and it has a beautiful aroma to the resin. That resin, so I have asthma, and this is like our go-to medicine in our house. We'll take this like in the wintertime if I start having an asthma attack, or if I catch a cold and I start getting some gunk in my lungs, we'll take some of this and we'll boil it in a pot of water, put a towel over our head, and we'll breathe in that steam. And I'm telling you that nothing will clear out your sinuses faster than gumweed steam. And you kind of got to be ready for it because it's pretty gross, because it'll just make your nose start to run like crazy. But also you can drink it as a tea. People make a tincture out of it. If you've ever heard of a tincture are those fun little those fun little bottles that you see in the store with the dropper bottles, and they're super expensive. A 1 ounce bottle of gumweed tincture, and I'm telling you guys, it's just gumweed and vodka. That's all it is. That's all it is. They've taken gumweed and vodka, put it in a jar, strained it after a couple of months, and they put it in these little 1 ounce jars. $20. $20, and they're using cheap vodka. It's not like they're using it's not like they're using some really expensive stuff, right? So I'll pass that around if you don't know what gumweed looks like, but really medicinal, and you can actually buy the flowers online so that you can use them for teas and tinctures and things like that, and steams and all of that, but wonderful little medicine there. So those are just, like I said, literally, I measured the walk from my minivan to the door, found all of these, and I'll talk more about them. So I'm an ethnobotanist, so this is what I do all the time. I talk about how plants are used for food and medicine, and even building materials and stuff like that. I teach over at United Tribes in the Sustainable Agriculture program. So a lot of I love talking to our local farmers and ranchers, because a lot of the weeds that they really, really have a deep and burning dislike for are ones that, they could, so I don't know how many of you guys were there, but and might have seen us at Bismarcket a couple weeks ago. We went to Bismarcket, we harvested all the purslane. Do you all know purslane? From our cornfield that we have at United Tribes. We grow a lot of stuff for our students, and that they can then learn to sell and market, and we do value added as well. But we harvested all of our purslane, and we bundled it up in about 2-pound bundles, and took it to the farmer's market, and we sold out within 25 minutes. And we had it for $8 a bundle for purslane. If you don't know what that looks like, I'll show you a picture of it. It probably grows in your yard. It's very, very plentiful. It kind of has a thick, succulent leaf, and it creeps down onto the ground, right? So, yeah. Okay. But another, something else that you might have all over the place in your yard. Do any of you guys have rose bushes or wild rose growing? So wild rose is a lot more marketable even than cultivated roses, because it still has that gorgeous rosy aroma. I just think that one of the most horrible things about a lot of cultivated roses, especially like Valentine's roses and things like that, is that they've taken the smell out. For me, half of the beauty of a rose is its smell, right? Wild roses still smell like that. And, in our family, we do a lot of different things. These are rose hip orange muffins, which are a lot like cranberry orange muffins. If you've ever eaten the rose hips, oh, by the way, all roses are edible. There's no such thing as a poisonous rose, okay? But if you've ever eaten a rose hip, which are these berries that grow on the rose bush, they taste like a cross between a cranberry and an apple. They're really good, the red part of them. The rose petals on the flowers earlier in the year are also edible and medicinal. 3 little tiny rose hips have more vitamin C than a grapefruit. And the best part is, if you ever buy a vitamin C supplement from the store, you'll notice that it'll say rose hip vitamin C, or it'll say, wherever the source of vitamin C was. The reason those supplements are almost never from citrus is because citrus vitamin C is not really bioavailable. It's a marketing ploy. I mean, and a brilliant one, right? When you drink a huge glass of orange juice and you're sick and you're like, oh, I need some vitamin C, because vitamin C really does boost our immune systems and fight off infection. That's true. Numerous clinical trials have shown it, right? Over at the Sanford, at the hospital there, visit the cardiologists. They give all of their patients now, before they go through heart surgery, they'll give IV vitamin C in large doses to prevent post-surgical infection. So we're talking a real thing here, right? 3 little tiny rose hips have more vitamin C than a grapefruit. And the vitamin C in citrus, basically, we pee it out, okay? Like when you drink a big glass of orange juice, the vitamin C is not in a form that can be taken up by our cells. So you basically pee all that vitamin C out. But the vitamin C that's in rose hips is bioavailable. So you actually get a lot more of it. It's in a form that can be taken up by our cells, so it works. So anytime, like if someone in our community is gonna go through surgery, I always have them drink rosehip tea every day for a week before surgery and a week after surgery. Because we all know, like, people are really good at surgery. Very few people die during surgery these days, but post-surgical infections are super scary and common still, right? Because people go home. You know, we're pushed out of the hospitals really fast these days. People go home right away and they don't take care of like their incisions and things like that. And it results in some really, really nasty infections. Rose hips can really help to prevent that because they're just so high in vitamin C. But we eat them too. We make rose hip infused vinegar. I got to tell you guys, last year I took a quart jar and I packed it full of rose petals, these wild rose petals, and I poured vodka over the top. Someone told me to do this. And then when it was done, I let it sit like that for like 6 months, okay? All the color came out, and it resulted in this sort of pinkish beige liquid. It didn't look terribly appetizing, but when I opened up the jar, that smell of rose just came out of there full strength. It was like almost, it was almost overwhelming. It smelled so much like roses. And then I added half honey to make this sort of like cocktail thing. And it's fantastic. It tastes like roses. And I just think, like, if people got a hold of that, it's honey and roses. I mean, can you imagine? It's amazing. I wish I'd have brought some for you guys to sample. I don't know if you're all over 21, but so just fantastic. And you can use, like I said, all the roses. If you happen to have some rose bushes in your yard, you can use those. If you happen to have a bunch of wild roses on your property, you can use those. I do have to tell you guys, so there's this old Lakota story. Among the Lakota, they have a character called Iktomi, the trickster. He's the spider, the trickster spider, okay? And he's sort of like this figure who there's all sorts of tales about him screwing up all the time. He like makes all the mistakes so that hopefully we don't have to. We're trying to there's stories about him so that we like learn from all of his mistakes. And there's a story about Iktomi, and he's going around and he's eating all the rose hips. He's being super greedy. It's one of the few sources of sweet that grow on the prairie, of something that's really sweet, right? So he's going around eating all the red rose hips, and he's like, oh, yum, yum, yum. And everyone's like, hey, Iktomi, you're being super greedy. You're like eating all those rose hips, and you're not even removing the seeds. So you're gonna have problems later. Now, I don't know how many of you guys have ever opened up a rose hip before, but if you open a rose hip up, they have little seeds in there that are covered in little tiny sharp hairs. And I will not get into great detail about this story because it's super gross, but suffice it to say that all those little rose hip seeds and those tiny sharp hairs went through Iktomi's digestive system. And when they got toward the end of his digestive system, it was not a pretty thing. And actually the name of that story is Iktomi and the Itchy Ass Berries. So it's true, you can find it online. So make sure before you use rose hips for cooking, make jelly, make jam, and make the muffins. Rose hip jelly, by the way, amazing. But before you do that, remove the seeds from the inside of the rose hip so that you don't have the same problem. Okay. And so now I wanted to talk about dandelion. And I put this screenshot in here that I took. All I did was I went to Google and I typed in dandelion and I went to the shopping tab. And I wanted to show you guys that, here we have 1 pound of dandelion root for $25. I probably have about 30 pounds in my front yard. 30 pounds of dandelion root, right? incredibly desirable and marketable these days. Dandelion root is, you know, I always encourage people, like my mother is a really good example. We used to have a ton of dandelions in our yard, and she still lives in the same place where I grew up. And our neighbors used to complain and complain and complain and ask her to spray the dandelions, and she refused because we eat those and we use them for medicine. We always have my whole life. And now if you go to my mom's yard, there's not a single dandelion in her yard because she has literally just eaten them all out of there and you know, use them for medicine and stuff like that over the 30 years she's lived there. There's not a single dandelion. And she's kind of upset about it, you know? She's like, oh, I'll have to go to the neighbor's yard to get to the dandelions. When you're, so I've kind of made my neighbor famous, and I feel bad for her, but her name's Tammy, and she's a fantastic woman, but she, you know, sprays her yard with herbicide. And she goes around like with her like Roundup backpack thing, and she sprays her lawn. And she used to, you know, we'd always see her right on the property line because we never spray. And she's always like trying to get some over into our yard too to get rid of our dandelions. And the crazy thing is that she sprays all her dandelions, and then she comes up to Bismarck to go to the Walmart and buy the organic dandelion root tea I was telling you about. And I'm like, oh man, you could like totally be getting that for free. Dandelion root has been shown through clinical trials and tons of really good research to help to heal the liver. And so she has fatty liver disease, and so she drinks dandelion root tea every day, advised by her physician. And dandelion root really is fantastic for improving liver function. If you know someone with fatty liver, if you know someone with cirrhosis, if you know someone who just has diminished liver function, it just you know may not be producing and filtering as well, dandelion root tea is something that they can start using. You can use the leaves as well, but there's more medicine in the roots. If you have, by the way, don't wait till the end to ask questions. Feel free to just raise your hand or shout out or whatever. I know sometimes when we get to the end, we kind of forget about stuff. So feel free to ask questions. But dandelion root, by the way, if you've never harvested some dandelion roots, and I'm telling you, just try it. Harvest 5 or 6 dandelion roots, wash them really well, and then put them into your oven on a super low temperature, about 200 degrees or even less, like 190, and just let them slow roast in there. You'll see them turn sort of black, and they'll even start like leaking sugars, right? Dark stuff. Then you want to get all of that and basically make coffee out of it. Dandelion root coffee, okay? It's just dandelion root. When you've slow roasted it like that, make coffee out of it. It tastes like it's been infused with chocolate and caramel. It's absolutely delicious. Dandelion root has a lot of natural sugars, but it also has a compound in there called inulin. Inulin is necessary for proper pancreas function and for the release of insulin. Right? So dandelion root is fantastic for diabetics. It is such a great medicine that they're actually marketing it for that, like as a medicine for diabetes. It does also help to lower and regulate blood sugar, but really what it's doing is it's improving pancreatic function. Okay, so you can drink it almost like a coffee that way. You could just drink the unroasted dandelion root tea as well, which is good, but bitter. Okay, now I'm of the mind that we all need to sort of change our palates to start appreciating bitter flavors again. I know a lot of you probably have ancestry from Europe, and back in the day, over in Europe, people were eating bitter greens all the time, right? It was a regular part of the diet. Think of all the old fairy tales and stuff about people craving bitter greens, right? I mean, it used to be a thing, but these days our palates have changed, and we think that everything we eat has to be sweet or salty. Right? Think about the last time you honestly ate something bitter. Coffee doesn't count. Although coffee does have medicinal compounds in it, right? But really, you know, when was the last time you really ate something that was bitter? The tops of the celery. Everyone just takes them off and throws them away or composts them, right? Bitter greens are something that's really necessary for our health. Bitter, those bitter alkaloids that are in a lot of vegetables are where all the medicine is, you know? So it's a really important thing to start incorporating into our diet. And you can do it a little bit at a time, you know? My husband grew up eating what I call brown and white food, okay? Meat and potatoes, meat and rice, meat and noodles, right? That's what he grew up eating. And when I tell you that his mom makes delicious soup with just meat and potatoes and salt, it's delicious. But that's all that she puts in it. Like no celery, no onion, nothing. And I didn't grow up that way, you know? And so it has taken time for me to help to change and develop my husband's palate over time. And he wanted that, right? Because he could see that like his blood pressure was high, you know, his blood sugars were running a little high, you know, and over a little over a decade now, we have like our whole family, even though we're chubby, we all have perfect cholesterol, perfect blood pressure, everything that, you know, when they look at liver function, when they look at the function of our pancreas, the function of our kidneys, all of us are just spot on perfect. And I really attribute that to our diet, you know, like all the medicines that we're incorporating into our diet every day. Our 7-year-old son can go outside and we give him a bowl and we tell him, okay, go out and make a salad. And he'll go out and he'll harvest the lamb quarters and he'll harvest the plantain leaves and he'll harvest the dandelion and he'll bring them back in. And that's what we have for salad every night, you know? I will tell you that with the rising price of groceries, it has also really helped to cut down on our grocery bill to be able to incorporate these into our diet basically every day. And dandelions are a part of that. So, you know, I actually grew up, my dad's from the South, and so I grew up eating dandelion greens fried with bacon. I feel like bacon and ranch dressing are two of the great food equalizers. Like, you know, my students come in and one of their first assignments in class is to go out and harvest, wash, and consume 5 dandelion leaves. And I can't tell you what a hard time that is for some of them, right? And we're talking, you know, kids who are like 19, early 20s, and it's really hard for them to eat 5 dandelion leaves until I tell them they can dip them in ranch dressing first. And then they're like, oh, okay, that's just salad. You know, I do the same thing with 6th graders. I do have students who also take the leaves and wrap them around bacon and then eat them. And that's fine, as long as they're consuming them. I don't care how they get it, you know, as long as they're trying it. Dandelion flour fritters, by the way, and a little bit of cornmeal and fried. Delicious. But yeah, the whole dandelion, the root, the leaves, the stem, the flower, all edible, all medicinal. There's a really fantastic study out of the University of Windsor up in Canada. It's called the Dandelion Root Study. And they are using plain powdered dandelion root, not roasted, just dandelion root, powdered to treat 6 different types of cancer successfully. They're shrinking tumors. They're helping people through chemo. It's absolutely crazy. You can go online and you can Google the dandelion root study out of Windsor. And I'm telling you, it's phenomenal what they're doing. When I spoke to the head doctor, the lead physician on the study, he said the most important thing was that when people tend to make dandelion root tea, they want to make the tea, infuse the water, and then throw the dandelion root away and then drink the infusion, right? That's what tea is. He said, no, you can't do that. You have to make the tea, boil the powder for about 20 minutes, stir it up really well, and then drink the water and the powder. And he said, that's how they're getting the best results. But they are curing 6 different types of cancer. He said, even in some of the cases where the tumors didn't disappear, they would shrink. In cases where the tumors didn't shrink, people were able to handle chemo better. It was like protecting their liver, protecting their kidneys. And we all know that chemo, you really have to protect your liver when you're on chemo, right? And he was finding that it was really, really protecting the liver, just drinking dandelion root tea every day. You know, this is something we spray, that we vilify, right? That we walk over every day and that we're kind of like curse them, you know? And it's amazing in medicine, like the creator has like put right there for us. It's fantastic stuff. So any questions? Yes. So all we do, and we do this actually over at the college as well, we have those special dandelion root shovels. Have you seen those? They actually make a special shovel just for dandelion roots, and they go into the ground really easy, and you pull up and the whole dandelion comes out. It's fantastic for getting rid of them too. So we take them back and we separate the greens and stuff off, and we just wash them really well, and then we dry them and powder them. We have one of those, we use it for cornmeal as well. We have one of those electric grinders. Yeah, and we just put our dandelion roots in there after they've dried completely and just powder them. That's all we do. And we make dandelion root powder, and we hand it out to like all of our students and staff and other people in the community. So we have some if you need some. We just let them air dry. And you can't do that. You know, I always tell my friends like down in Florida and South Carolina that air drying plants down there is tough. But up here, it's super easy. And I know that like today is actually a little humid, but we live in an incredibly dry place. We air dry meat traditionally. I don't know how many of you guys know that, but of course you guys probably have made jerky before and you put the meat into a dehydrator. We don't. We actually thinly slice the meat just like you would if you were making jerky, and we hang it, well, in my dining room. Is that like we have what we call well, it's kind of like a ladder. It's just a bunch of dowels fed through two other boards that are going this way. So it looks kind of like a ladder. And we thinly slice the meat and we air dry it. And that's a important food for tribes all over the Great Plains, dried buffalo meat. And then we have it for all winter long, and we don't have to worry about like if the freezer goes out or something like that, right? So air drying things is very easy to do here. All you have to do, you can like lay some paper towels down on one of your kitchen counters. We have no open kitchen counters during the summer and fall in my house because we have so much stuff drying. I have probably about 6 pounds of stinging nettles drying right now, and about 6 to 10 pounds of dandelion root drying right now, just because we use it, you know. And sometimes we'll even, just because I'm a real believer in like hiding medicine for my family, you know, we'll take a spoonful or two of dandelion root powder and just throw it into all of our soups and all of our pastas. It doesn't change the flavor at all, but they're still getting a little bit of medicine in there, you know. Spaghetti sauce, I'll throw every kind of medicine in there because you can't really taste anything in spaghetti sauce. So, you know, I even throw bee balm. Do you guys know bee balm, that beautiful pink flower that grows all over the prairie? I'll throw some of that in there because it tastes like oregano. I'll throw dandelion leaves and dandelion root powder in there. You know, just little bits of medicine every day. I feel like that's important. Any other questions?
So, do you have to cook the dandelion root, dandelion powder? Does it have to be cooked somehow, or can you just eat it raw?
You can absolutely eat dandelion root raw. And the only thing is that it's bitter, and so some people don't like to do it. But sometimes, like if we're out camping or something, and I do what we call survival weekends with my students, and my students end up eating a lot of raw dandelion root because it's a plant that's easy to identify. There are no poisonous lookalikes. There's no poisonous lookalikes for a dandelion. So I saw like a false dandelion, or what we call prickly dandelion out here, Sonchus oleracea, grown right out here. Totally edible and medicinal, very similar to a dandelion. There's nothing that looks like a dandelion that's toxic. So when we have these survival weekends where I make my students feed themselves, I make them filter or boil water, I make them make their own fire, all using plants, they eat a lot of dandelion root when they do that. I once had a student try to sneak in little packets of ranch in a pocket because he just knew that it was going to be a really tough weekend for him. You know, he had a diet growing up a lot like my husband, and he was like, I need some salt or something, you know. But yeah, we found him. So yeah, you can totally eat fresh dandelion root, but it is bitter. And dandelion root actually now is less bitter than it was earlier in the summer. I don't know why. I'm not sure what chemical change happens, but right now is a really good time to harvest dandelion root. Any questions on any of the plants we've talked about so far? Okay, I'll just say catnip is another one. How many of you guys have catnip randomly growing in your yard? Yeah, We have an elder's garden on campus, and I cannot get rid of the catnip. I end up pulling it out, and we end up drying it because, 10-ounce bag of catnip for almost $20. 10 ounces, right? I pull out 10 ounces out of my elder's garden every day, because it's so invasive in there. And it's not native, but it's a member of the mint family. Cats, of course, love it. But that's only one marketing strategy for it. It is actually wonderful for reducing fevers, helping even chill. It's totally safe too. It's just a mint, right? And so if you have issues with digestion, like indigestion or heartburn or acid reflux, catnip tea can really help with that. But also it's great for fevers, even for kids. So you can give a kid a cup of dandelion root tea before bed, like if they have like a low-grade fever. And you'll notice that they kind of sweat in their sleep, but then the fever's broken by morning. I've almost never had it not work, except for one time when it was a pretty bad bacterial infection. But it's, fantastic medicine and really common. Chickweed is one that I notice a lot around under trees and things like that. Stellaria media. Chickweed fritters for breakfast, something that's a favorite in my family. It's like a little plant that kind of creeps and grows along the ground. It's really tender, so it's actually a really delicious green vegetable to eat. But I wanted to show this 1 ounce bottle of chickweed oil. Now, I talked to this lady named Telia, okay, and I asked her, how do you make your chickweed oil? You can actually still find this on Amazon. This is a 1 ounce bottle of chickweed oil. And she said, I'll tell you what, you want to know the most expensive part of this process? Does anyone know? The bottle. Yeah, that cute little bottle with the label is the most expensive part, because all she does is she takes cheap olive oil, not extra virgin olive oil, not even organic. She takes cheap olive oil, she puts it into a crock pot, puts a whole bunch of chickweed in there and lets it go overnight. Then she strains it and she puts it in these cute bottles. $13 for 1 ounce. $13, right? And so she's making, an $11, $12 profit on every bottle, and it sells. She sells out of it all the time, okay? Why are people using chickweed oil? They're taking it internally because it helps to regulate the thyroid. If you know someone, and it's not for people, it won't take the thyroid function too high. It won't cause hypothyroidism, and it won't cause hyper and hypo. It won't do that. It regulates the thyroid. And so it really helps with the release of hormones and stuff. So if you know anyone who has some thyroid issues, chickweed oil 2 to 3 times a day, 6 to 10 drops 2 to 3 times a day is wonderful medicine, and it's totally safe and simple to use. Okay. We also use chickweed oil for fibroids. So women who have fibrocystic breast tissue, a fibroid on the uterus, we massage it into the area, and they can also take it internally. Okay. It's wonderful for those. So any questions on chickweed? Really common. Here's one. So last week at Biz Market, we sold chamomile tea. But wild chamomile tea. Wild chamomile is just pineapple weed. Do you guys have a bunch of pineapple weed? Does anyone here have a lot of pineapple weed in their yard? If you ever reach down and you smell those little yellow cones, they smell like fresh cut pineapple. To me, they're better than cultivated chamomile. And this is like the sibling to chamomile. So chamomile tea that you see in the store, if you have pineapple weed, you have chamomile growing right in your yard. And wild chamomile tea, this actually has more of the compounds that help us sleep and help us to relax. So if you know someone who suffers from anxiety, someone who suffers from insomnia, pineapple weed, also known as wild chamomile tea, is fantastic tea, and it tastes great. So even kids with ADD and ADHD who might hyperactivity issues, you can use pineapple weed for them as a tea. Totally safe. It just helps them to take a deep breath and chill out for a little bit, and like I said, totally safe. This is actually pineapple weed flan that someone I know online makes it. They infuse their flan, which is like an egg custard, with pineapple weed. delicious. But the tea is wonderful. And we went to Bismarck and we were selling wild chamomile tea. We bought those fillable tea bags with the drawstring. So they're just tea bags like a Lipton tea bag, but they have a drawstring. So you can put whatever you want in them. And we were selling 5 tea bags for $4. So that was 5 teaspoons of wild chamomile for $4, right? It costs maybe 25 cents to make those, maybe 25 cents. Because those, you can buy 200 tea bags for about $3. Yeah, the pineapple weed was free. So, I mean, it's such an easy way to do it, but wonderful also for you if you're having any trouble sleeping or relaxing. It's a great tea. I always say if you're trying to get off of coffee, chamomile is not for you because it's not a caffeine replacement. It will actually put you to sleep. Okay, questions? Yes.
I gave my daughter chamomile tea that we made at home because she had colic.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. It works so great for colic. And in my opinion, better than, some people will talk about peppermint. Peppermint is almost too shocking for infants, whereas chamomile is so mild and so easy. And and you can use pineapple weed the exact same way. This is just chamomile. So if you look at the scientific name, Matricaria discoidea, chamomile is Matricaria camomilia. Okay, pretty sure that's the species name. So they're basically siblings, But like I said, this has even more of those beautiful medicinal compounds, and yet is still totally safe. Yes.
Would you dry those before you use them?
You can use them dried or fresh, but the medicine is more concentrated when they're dried. So like if I was going to make a fresh cup of pineapple weed tea, I'd probably use a full tablespoon of pineapple weed. But if I was going to make the dried, I just use like a teaspoon and a half. There's this company called David's Tea, and they really pride themselves on like making the perfect cup of tea. And they sell what they call the perfect teaspoon, and it's a teaspoon and a half measure, is what it is. They call it the perfect teaspoon. So,
Do you use the whole plant or
just the flowers, and that's not because the leaves and the stems do have the medicine in there, but they don't have that aroma of pineapple and they don't have the flavor. So if you're just using it for the medicine, you can use the whole plant. But if you're using it because, it's delicious and it smells great, then you use the flowers only. Okay. Chickweed, I'll just go through a couple real quick here. Chickweed I'm sorry, not chickweed. I talked about chickweed already. Cleavers. This is that one, people call it sticky willy. It almost looks like a vine when it's growing. It'll stick to you, almost like Velcro when you're walking around. It loves to grow in flower beds and things like that. It's probably growing in your tree rows and you might not even know it. Again, cleaver leaf oil, 1 ounce bottle for $15. There's a spot in the woods by where I live, where the cleavers grow so thick that I can go like this and get us about 6 pounds of it. Right now, there's a company called Mountain Rose Herbs that is selling cleavers for $26 a pound. And like I said, there's a place where it grows so thick, I can go like this and get about 6 pounds of it with one armful, and they're selling it for $26 for 1 pound, Mountain Rose Herbs. And they look for wildcrafted stuff. So I always tell my students, like, if you want a really good sort of side income, just choose one plant that you know where you can get a lot of it sustainably and just concentrate on that. And you can sell it to these guys. I have one student who makes his car payment every month only by harvesting chickweed, not cleavers, the chickweed that I talked about a couple minutes ago. That's how he makes his car payment every month, is just that. So, I asked him, like, how long does it take you to harvest enough to make your car payment every month? And he said that, well, he harvests enough all summer long and all, spring and even into fall. And he's even gotten to know how he can harvest it so that it'll come back flourishing and even more thick. He said that it takes him probably about 3 hours a month during those months to make his car payment all year long. So, you know, and it's a good medicine. You can actually, like, the cleavers, again, are another one that's used for thyroid function and for, it's used a lot like chickweed, which is why I was getting them mixed up when I was talking about it. But yeah, we make, if you know a kid, anyone who has trouble with eczema or psoriasis, we make a salve that's, so that's just basically up here. This is cleavers mixed with olive oil, coconut oil, and a little bit of beeswax. And then we leave it to harden into a salve. And we give that to parents who use it like a lotion on their kid's skin. If you've ever seen eczema, it can get really bad like cauliflower ears, the itchy spots right in the fold of your elbow or behind the knee. Adults have issues with eczema too. The vast majority of time, it's a dairy allergy. The reason I think of this with kids is because a lot of kids have eczema these days. So my son, who's he's in college now, he's 20. His whole life he had eczema, and we would use cleaver. We would use cleaver salve. We'd use all different kinds of salves, burdock root, things like that, and they would always work for about 3 months, and then his eczema would come back. We found out one day. Randomly, he had gotten off dairy for some reason for like a week, and his eczema completely went away. And we were like, oh my God, I can't believe you've been allergic to dairy this whole time. And so he's pretty much off dairy, but every once in a while he'll eat like a large cheese pizza. He loves them. And then he'll be like, it was worth it. It was worth it, you know? But a lot of times, so, you know, eczema and psoriasis can be attributed to an allergy. Dairy or gluten are the two most common. So this is a great salve to help treat that. We'll talk about, well, nettles. How many of you have come in contact with nettles in your life? Yeah, it doesn't feel great, right? But let me tell you, we were always taught that if we pick nettles barehanded with no gloves or anything, we'll never get arthritis in our hands. And we've really found that to be true. It's something that's been passed down for Native people for a really long time, but not just Native people here. Like over in Europe, people have been using nettles. Nettle soup, first thing in the spring, is a common spring tonic all over Eastern Europe to this day, and up into like Norway and Finland. Every year there's like nettle festivals there where people come and they share nettle soup every spring because it's a wonderful spring tonic. So, you know, you're sitting around all winter long, you're not moving around as much, and you know, kind of need to cleanse a little bit. Nettles is wonderful for that. But more than that, and you can, I always tell my students, okay, never ever just believe me, you know, go ahead, look it up, look for papers, look for the studies, you know, test me. And you know, I always think that's a good thing, getting students to think for themselves and to think critically and to verify things. And so I have my students always do research on stinging nettles. Stinging nettles contain a powerful, powerful anti-inflammatory. So inflammation causes so many of the health issues that we all face. Arthritis is inflammation of joint and muscle tissues, right? Nettles are amazing for arthritis. Like absolutely, there's nothing else I've ever seen that works quite as well. Even a lot of prescription stuff for anti-inflammatories do not work as well as nettles. Allergies, you know, allergies are inflammation of sinuses and tissues around the eyes and things like that. That's why your nose runs. That's why your sinuses get stuffy. That's why your lungs swell up a little bit or close up due to asthma. Allergy-induced asthma. It's all about inflammation. Nettles are great for that. We drink nettle tea every day in my family for allergies and asthma. You know, even some cases of depression are actually caused by brain tissues becoming inflamed. Post-COVID depression, that's all about inflammation. It's all about brain tissues swelling up. And so we've been using a lot of nettles for that handing it out to community members. And it's absolutely amazing how well it works. We have had elders who couldn't breathe after 6 months. 6 months after they had COVID, they were still like having a really hard time taking a deep breath. We would give them nettles for 3 days and they'd be 100% back. Their oxygen would be back up to 98, 99%. So it's, such a fantastic medicine. We actually do something that freaks people out. We recommend what we call, well, my husband said I have to stop calling them whipping treatments. So we do what we call, there's a name for it. It's called urtication. So the scientific name of nettles is Urtica dioica, and there's this process called urtication, and that's where you take nettles and you basically whip your joints with them. And if you go anywhere in Indian country, you'll actually sometimes see elders sitting on their front porch whipping their hands with nettles because of the arthritis in their hands, or whipping their knees with it. When my husband and I, if we have trouble, like we both have bad knees from sports back earlier in the day, we put on a pair of shorts and go run through the nettle patch and just let it whip our legs to like crazy. And we're pain-free for 2 months after that. It's a powerful, powerful medicine that's really great for all those sore joints and stuff. So, and I wanted to say that nettles are amazing. They're even put in all kinds of bougie shampoos these days. If you ever stay up and watch infomercials at night, you'll see those infomercials for the really expensive shampoos all have nettles in them because it actually helps to stimulate hair follicles and so that hair will grow better and thicker and faster. So, I wanted to show this. So these are candied violets. Of course, violets probably grow in all your lawns. They're really pretty, but did you know violets are totally edible? My favorite way to have them is candied. So we don't candy them with white sugar in my family. We actually dip them in a little bit of maple syrup, and then we lay them out to dry, and they're maple candied violet flowers. So delicious. But these are just candied violet petals, $16 for 1 ounce. And we have a lot of violets that grow in our lawn, so we use those a lot. A lot of people will take the violet leaves, those heart-shaped leaves, and make salve out of them. It's really moisturizing. Violet leaf lip balm is becoming a really popular thing. Even Burt's Bees makes a violet leaf lip balm now because it's really moisturizing for sensitive skin. That's just a picture of candied violets on top of like a little baked item. Delicious. And then, of course, the wormwood that I was talking about earlier. Did you guys know that wormwood is the origin of absinthe? Absinthe, of course, is a liquor. It's an alcoholic beverage. Back in the day in Europe, they had very poor distillation, okay? And when wormwood, this, is poorly distilled, it becomes psychoactive. And so like, you've heard the story, Vincent van Gogh, the painter, cut off his ear and mailed it to his girlfriend. He was on absinthe when he did that. Lewis Carroll, when he wrote like Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, if you've ever wondered why that sounds like a big trip, because it is, it was. He was drinking absinthe when he wrote those. Everyone thinks that Edgar Allan Poe, when he wrote all that crazy poetry, The Raven and the Telltale Heart and all of that, everyone thinks that he was a bourbon drinker, but he was an absinthe drinker. And that's actually we believe that's what killed him, is too much absinthe that destroyed his liver. These days, it will not do that. We have much better distillation, and so you actually can. Absinthe was illegal in the United States until fairly recently, but because of new distillation methods that are much better, you can actually buy absinthe even in the U.S. still. Over in Europe, I have friends from Norway, and they call it the green fairy because they say you see fairies when you drink it. But all of that said, you can actually drink wormwood tea. And why would you want to do that? Because I will tell you right now that wormwood is the most bitter substance ever. And I can handle bitter, okay? I eat a lot of bitter greens. I drink a lot of bitter teas. You know, I know the health benefits. I incorporate bitter flavors into my life every day. Bitter people probably too, but that's another story. This is bitterness on a scale that it's hard to describe. So a lot of people prefer the capsules. I was actually doing a migrant farm tour in Guatemala when I was 19, and I got Giardia. That's the parasite that you get by drinking the water there. Well, I had no choice but to drink the water down there, you know? And so I got Giardia, and the local Mayan tribe gave me wormwood, and they basically took the leaves that were dried and they rolled them almost into like little pills, and then they coated them in powdered sugar for me, and I had to like take 10 to 15 of them every day. But I did that and my Giardia was gone in 4 days. It was unbelievable, right? Because if you've ever had to get treatment for Giardia, you know that it's tough to get rid of. And some people will have it, they'll get better, and then 20 years later they'll have a recurrence of it. You know, it's been 30 years. I've never had a recurrence of Giardia in my life. So you know, such a great medicine. Wormwood was used all throughout the COVID-19 pandemic because it's powerfully antiviral as well. So you'll see that they actually sell wormwood. A lot of times they'll sell it in combination with walnut, with black walnut, because it's super antimicrobial. So if you suffer from H. pylori, which is a bacteria that affects your gut, you can actually take the wormwood black walnut tincture every day to kill the H. pylori. It'll kill other bacteria too. It's like really, really super antibacterial. You can even, you know, people will use it for all sorts of parasites, even worms, even in animals. So like large animals like cattle and horses, even in dogs, people will use wormwood to treat. Well, that's why it's called wormwood, right? I don't know if anyone knows that, but that's why it's called wormwood, because it kills intestinal and parasitic worms. So any questions on any of that? Sorry, I'd planned on trying to take you guys outside, and I see I've been talking for an hour now. So I apologize for that, but do we want to get the lights? I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have them. On the wormwood? It doesn't really, no. And in fact, like I've actually used it during the winter. Like there's a lady who went down to Cancun and she got Giardia down there, and she I don't know if it was Giardia. She never ended up going to the doctor, but it was January and she went to Cancun and she came back and she was all of a sudden super sick, like diarrhea, vomiting, all that. And she had this weird looking brown mark that went down the veins of her arm here on her right arm. It was the weirdest thing I ever saw. And she did go to the doctor, but it wasn't helping. But even before she went to the doctor, I went out and I trudged through the snow in January, and I got the dried wormwood that was sticking up through the snow, and I gave that to her. That's what got rid of whatever was afflicting her. She drank it for about she actually drank the tea every day because she was so desperate to get better. And it took about 6 days for her to get better. And yeah, even the stuff that the doctor was giving her wasn't helping. So, yep, you can get it anytime. Any other questions? Cool. Well, I'm always available. I'm at United Tribes, and if you ever need anything, feel free to call me, feel free to email. If you're ever like, oh my gosh, like I have the stomach ache or whatever, and you don't want to like just, I hate going to the doctor for every little thing. So if you have any questions like that and you ever, need any advice, feel free to call me or email me. Okay. Awesome. Thank you guys so much.